Hey, welcome to Wisdom Wednesday with Pastor Josh. Wisdom is the quality or state of being wise, as knowledge of what is true, right, coupled with just judgment as to action, sagacity, discernment, and insight. We're going to look at what that means today on this edition of Wisdom Wednesday. Hey, welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. Wisdom Wednesday. That's really can be a tongue twister, can it? Wisdom Wednesday. Hey, I'm so glad you're joining me today. We've been on a journey this week. We're doing, this is one long conversation, so remember these podcasts have been pre-recorded together, so that that's why I look like I'm in the same outfit as I was yesterday. This is all one big long conversation, and so I'm just kind of talking about different aspects of it. And so we've talked about conspiracy theories, we've talked about end times stuff, and today I want to talk to you about influence, about opportunity. And it really comes from 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32, where it says that the people, the men, some translations say the men, others say people, it's just humanity. The tribe of Issachar were men who knew the times. There are people who knew the times. And so as you study that out, you start asking the questions about what it means and start looking into it. It's really talking a lot about influence. It's talking about how this tribe had grew prominent and influential, and really, it's important for us to understand our times. It's important for us to understand the influence that we have. We all have influence, every single one of us. Some of us more than others, and some of us at different times more than other times. And so we all have influence right now. And the question is are we using our influence for the things that God has called us to, or are we using it improperly? Are we using it poorly? And is it causing a bad taste in the mouths of those around us? I think of how we handle certain things, like even a week ago, our governor reopening the churches, and then the churches having to decide if they're really going to move on site and not just online, or if they're going to remain online. For us as a church, we decided to remain online this past weekend. Just because of everything that's going on and the other restrictions involved. Although we are able to open, some of the restrictions make it where really it's very hard to be open and to do it well, and we were really focused on doing it well. And so, it's interesting because I've had people respond and say, hey, we're watching, and it's a blessing to us. I've had people reach out and say things like, hey, how you've handled this has really been a blessing to us. And, things like that. Well, as I'm thinking, I didn't know you were paying attention. I didn't even think about, honestly, I didn't think about you necessarily as much as I was thinking about the church and what we were doing, although I was trying to think about other people too. And, but in the decision making and stuff, we don't always think about other people around us and the influence we have and how people are watching how we respond to things. And so I guess it's just a reminder that people definitely watch. And so I think about understanding the times and how we're really called to invest our influence well. There's that old phrase, this isn't a hill to die on. I think we have to be careful what hills we die on, especially now more than ever. And I'll be honest, I've been guilty of dying on the wrong hills, so to speak, where it's like something became a bigger issue than it really needed to be. And knowing what those things are is so important. It's part of wisdom, and I haven't had that figured out. I think we're all probably struggling with that a little bit, but that's part of the journey, is realizing how to stay engaged with what is important, and then to recognize what's not important, and to be able to deal with the difference that brings. And so one of the things I wanted to share too is that Paul tells Timothy, he says, fight the good fight of faith. As I grew up, I was a fighter. You might not picture that, but I was a fighter. Even in the second grade, I had a friend who was a large friend of mine. And I don't mean that in any mean, derogatory way of any kind. But he was like twice my size, my height and width in second grade. And him and I were best friends. And I remember one day on the playground, something happened. We got in a tussle, and I ended up knocking the kid out. And I know you might not be able to picture that, but I did. I knocked him, laid him out. And I remember the principal, I was called in the principal's office, and then I ended up getting suspended for 2 days. I don't know if you can picture that, but I was suspended for 2 days. The only time I've ever been suspended, just so that's on the record. But I remember that wasn't a good fight. Nothing good came from that. I remember getting lots of different tussles like that. And that was one of the works that God did in my life when Christ entered into the scene of my life. He began to really change that in me. And but so I've seen my fair share of bad fights, and not even just physically, but emotionally, verbally. I've seen just bad choices of what to fight for, just bad causes to fight for, and even in the church world, it can be really easy. And so it's interesting that Paul, at the end of his life, is telling Timothy, fight the good fight of faith. He implies that there's a bad fight we can fight. And are we fighting a bad fight? Or are we fighting a good fight? And I think it has a lot to do with our influence and how we use our influence and what we choose to be our end game. And so can I just challenge you with that? During all this stuff going on, we've talked about conspiracy theories and the end times and all that. And can I just challenge you? Don't use your capital. Don't use the investment of your influence for things that aren't going to bring God glory, that aren't going to bring God and the message of his kingdom to impact on the other people's lives. Don't let your biggest influence be used for political gain. Don't let your conversation be driven by political things and negativity. And people will remember your influence and what you influence them to. And you want them to be able to remember that you influence them towards Christ and not that you influence them away. Don't be the one who influences them away because you chose a bad fight instead of a good fight. This has been Wisdom Wednesday with Pastor Josh. Thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you tomorrow.